Hi, and welcome to the second video for Everyone's Interesting podcast. And I'm your host, Greg Alange. Today, I figured I'd do a short video to give you all something so that you can walk away from this video, hopefully with something that might be of some use to you. I don't know. It might not be. I don't know. We'll have to see. One of my many jobs I have within my in-home therapy team is I do a lot of what we call emotional regulation work. I do it primarily with kids, ranges of age from 4, to probably about 19. So, I run the whole spectrum of different age groups to work on how to remain calm when you're having a tough time. Very important for me to say here that most people, I think, are able to reflect back on getting through, our years of COVID. And I would say to you that I have been calling COVID for a very long time a prolonged traumatic event. In other words, something that's been going over a significant amount of time, and that, over time, there was a lot of feelings of extreme fear, depression, anxiety, a lot of those types of things, hopelessness for a lot of people. So what we found was that a lot of the kids, I'd say in my experience, any of the kids that are aged from like 9 right now to probably about 17 or 18, that group was very, very impacted, I have found professionally, through the isolation of having to deal with the pandemic. And also about the fact we always have to remember with kids that brain development is very different for kids than it is for their parents, of course. So I work with the kids, I also work with the parents. So 2 things we're going to talk about today, one of which is 2 things that you can do with your kids in terms of helping them work on their regulation skills. This does not have to do just with, let's say, kids who have anger outbursts. These techniques I'm going to give to you today also do work with kids who are getting anxious and panicking. I would say to you, if they're experiencing extreme sadness, this is something that might be able to help as well. So what we want to do with with your kids and any kids that you know or want to help out with some regulation skills, because a lot of kids lost a lot of skills during the pandemic. And adults too, for that matter. I mean, everybody was coping in their own ways that they could. So one thing that we do talk a lot about is the idea of controlling one's breath flow. I took martial arts cumulatively for about 10 years, studied a number of different arts, from karate to taekwondo to Japanese jiu-jitsu, kung fu, tai chi. And in all of them, you learn a lot about punching and throwing somebody across the room and whatever the case is, and, joint locks and everything. But in all of the arts that I've taken, at one point or another, there was some discussion about the idea of breathing, because what happens when we're in a survival state is sometimes what happens is our airflow is not getting to our brain, and as a result, what's ending up happening is that we're in more of a survival mindset, and that's when adrenaline starts pumping, that's when cortisol starts pumping, and sometimes we're not able to access the decision-making part of our brain because we're in sort of a much more perceived, scared, and concerned and stressed version. So part of what I do a lot with the kids and the parents that I work with, or any caregivers that I work with, is we talk a lot about the idea of 2 things. One, like I was saying, is controlling one's airflow. So part of what I teach with a technique, depending upon the age of the kids, smaller kids, we try to make it a little bit fun, and maybe there'll be a future podcast that I talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that we do also talk a lot about is taking in a certain amount of seconds on airflow. So if someone's in a perceived state that they're realizing they're struggling, whether they're infuriated, enraged, of course, if they're anxious, over anxious, if they're panicking, I always train people into how to recognize when these things are happening to us. And then, of course, the most important thing is, how do I slow those things down so that I can then make the best decisions to essentially try to see if I can help myself feel a little tiny bit better. So that's really, really important. So part of what we do a lot of training with the folks that I work with is we do a lot of work on breathing. Now, I would never tell you I'm a guru. Some people think I am. I would tell you I'm definitely not. I have worked with people who actually have 10 times more breathing skills than I do and different techniques. I will have those people probably on at some point to do a little bit of a tutorial for those who would like some immediate help. But one of the things that we do is you have to recognize that you're having a tough time or enraged or whatever the situation, like we just said. And then the most important thing you can do is start to breathe in, recognize you're having a tough time, and start getting air to your brain. So recognizing you're having a tough time, then breathing in for 3 seconds. I like to employ a technique of holding the breath for 2 or 3 seconds. I can get back to that as to why, but then we're going to breathe in, then we're going to hold it for 2 or 3 seconds, and then you always want to breathe out 1 second longer than you breathed in for. So if you breathed in for 3 seconds as an example, I use that a lot with younger people and also sometimes with the elderly that I've worked with, is that, we want to breathe in, hold it, and then breathe out. Try that several times if you're having a tough time, and try to see if you can get, this way, the more air you get to your brain, the better decision that you'll make. The other thing, just to give you quickly, is that so many decades ago, I was trained in what's called catastrophic response through the trauma center that used to be in Brookline. And part of what this was that we would do groups with kids who were having like major catastrophic things happening at school. Like before there was like rashes of school shootings like every other month, unfortunately. Back then you'd hear on AM radio, if you were somebody like me who would listen to AM radio back then, you'd hear, oh, well, there was like a crisis or a problem at a school and there are clinicians on the ground. Well, I used to be a part of that type of work. So part of what we learned how to do during those times was, because extreme mental illness in certain situations that are crisis-based can sometimes become viral. In other words, you could have a bunch of kids that are reacting to like a suicide of a friend. That could then, of course, affect their own mental health, and that could sometimes elicit a behavior in them the same way. So this is something we always have to be very careful of. One thing I would say to you is that one of the things that we learned a lot about in my training, which I think was really helpful, was, and I have one of these with me all the time, those who work with me know I have this with me all the time, is the power of hydration. So the big piece here to talk about quickly, I'll try to sum it up as fast as I can. I am not a scientist, and I'm not a biologist or a medical professional, so I can't give you anything around those specifics about what happens to the body specifically. What I can give you is that the big part of what we do is we try to work on hydration, because the big piece about hydration is what's happening when we're having one of these, like a panic response or a rage response or whatever the case might be, is that what's happening is that we're having a perceived stressor that we're trying to deal with intrinsically. And then what ends up happening is that what you want to do at that point is the adrenaline and the cortisol is starting to build up in the kidneys. So what I always tell the kids I work with is that what we want to do is, as we're having a tough time, the things that we do want to do is that we want to make sure that we're, as we're having a tough time, we're drinking water. How come? The reason we want to do water specifically is because what that's going to do is it's going to dilute the adrenaline and the cortisol that's building up in the kidneys. And this basically will hopefully give you the best chance of sort of naturally settling your body along with doing some deep breathing. And then what ends up happening is that, as you drink water, you don't want to overhydrate, but you want to drink enough that, that you're starting to hopefully help yourself out a little bit. And sometimes what I do with little kids is we pair up the idea of anger being like fire that's building up inside the body. And what we're doing is that we're breathing in. And then also what we're doing is we're giving in water to basically start putting out the fire that's building up inside us. I use that all the time with the really little kids, and they seem to like that a lot, which is great. So I just wanted to give that to you as something to do. So if you have a child yourself that you're dealing with who's having a really tough time, some of the most important things you can do with your children, regardless of what kind of age they are, if they're really small, they might need like a little bit more hands-on, just to make sure that they know that you're there. And what you want to do is, and I use these techniques myself, is that what you want to do is that you want to make sure that you're starting to take care of yourself as fast as you can. So whether that's starting the breathing, starting the hydration, and starting to bring your adrenaline levels down, either one is totally fine. There's no order of operations here. There's no book on this, you all. It's like you do whatever you need to do in order to get yourself in the best mindset that you can deal with not only the stressor you're dealing with right now, but also, and almost even more importantly, is other stressors that could be coming minutes later. because when we have compounded stress and a lot of other things, that's what ends up happening when people are having a really, really tough time. So I joke with the kids I work with, because they always think I'm, pretty calm and all the rest of that. We joke all the time that when I'm driving is when I'm probably most susceptible to getting angry, because people are driving like idiots and they're cutting me off, and my kids are in the car, and like stuff that everybody deals with. So we're all allowed to get angry. That's what it's part of what this human condition is. I tell the kids all day long, I feel like at work, I feel like I'm like a broken record. It's what you do with your anger. I also tell kids a lot of the times that anger can either be, specifically anger, I would say, can sometimes be either destructive, and we can hurt ourselves. We can do activities that, I don't know what the term is I'm looking for, but making bad decisions, or like unhealthy or unwise decisions, whatever the case might be. This is really our opportunity to kind of pull it together and see if, we can make some better decisions. And again, we have to make sure our brain is completely clear while that's happening. So we want to do the hydration and bring the adrenaline levels down in our body if we're in a heightened, escalated state. And then also we want to make sure we're doing some breathing techniques. It doesn't have to be this whole declaration of like, I'm doing this now. Like, you just do it on your own. You just do it as you feel comfortable. I also do this a lot when I was a performing musician. Sometimes I would drink some water beforehand just to bring my adrenaline levels down, so that then when I got on the stage and grabbed the microphone, I was in the calmest state I could be in, so that I can then, go out and perform, because, that can be anxiety producing. So anyway, I just wanted to share these techniques with you. I probably will do more of these type of videos, just because a lot of people, we all survived the pandemic. Those of us who are lucky to have survived. I know a lot of people who passed away. So we are really fortunate in that regard. But a lot of us did sustain a lot of damage, and our kids definitely sustained some damage during that. So for me, it's like when we talk about trauma histories at work, I'm almost like not laughing because it's not funny, but pretty much almost every child I know and have worked with had a very, very strong reaction to those years that they were isolated and worried about, if they were going to touch the doorknob the wrong way, if it was going to, kill their family members. I mean, this was like crazy stuff. But a lot of us did get through this, and I feel really lucky to have been able to do that. So I wanted to share some of these techniques with you, because these are things that, like I tell the kids I work with, especially the teens, I wish somebody had taught me these things, because I think this would have gotten me out of a whole lot of trouble as a teenager growing up in New York. Kept me out of, keep me in the best path, so to speak. So I hope you found this interesting. Please feel free to comment, like, share, all the stuff that everybody says. Please subscribe to my channel. It would be great. And I hope you got something from this video, and I hope that maybe you might be able to use this someday. Thanks so much.